You know, I've been wanting to talk about something for a long time, and I haven't talked about it. I've seen it occur during my whole life, growing up in a pastor's home and being a part of a church and being ordained in the ministry. What I'm talking about is the church pirate. There's a bunch of church pirates out there, and so you thought there weren't very many pirates anymore. Oh yeah, there's pirates. They're not sailing the seven seas really, but they're riding the waves of these major churches, because church pirates simply are people who get involved in a church, maybe in some leadership form, or maybe they're on staff, and then they build this kingdom, and then they go down the street and start a church, and they suck the people from the church to their church. And then when you confront them about it, they play the God card. Well, God told me. Really? Well, if you did that in the corporate world, and I've just been talking to some friends of mine recently who've just gone through this. One in particular, a betrayal happened for years and years and years. And in fact, both of these betrayals I've dealt with recently went over 20 years each. I mean, it took each pirate 20 years within the church, within these phenomenal churches, to make their move and to try to split and to take people from the church. And again, as I said earlier, the church planters, and I'm not sure about, I'm all in church planting. I think church planting is awesome. Fellowship Church is a legitimate church plant, but how many church plants are really church transplants? Are the churches legit, or are they from church split? That's a great question. Normally you hear church, this church grew in 3 years from 0 to 3,000 or 5,000. Generally speaking, most are church splits, or there was some situation where someone went into a church, built a kingdom, and bolted. But what happens, these staff members or leaders build these little followings, and they get money, and they talk to donors. And see, the laymen believe these people because laymen, they're always going to believe the victim. They're not going to believe the pastor. We're all about the victim. Oh, the smaller person. Oh yeah, I think that is right. What's happening? If we did this or that or whatever, that would be good. So I'm not into moving sheep from place to place. I'm not into stealing sheep from other places, and I'm definitely not into people advertising their disloyalty and being church pirates. But it's just pathetic when you see it, and I see it more and more and more these days. And again, if this happened in the business world or the corporate world, some of these people would be in jail by what they've done. You cannot do that in the corporate world. So if you're big and bad enough to go out and start your own church, which, man, my hat goes off to you, go for it. Take off the Johnny Depp pirate stuff and put on, a pastor's garb and go to some place that needs churches and do that. Don't start churches, especially around the church that built you and that gave you the platform and to help you into the person you are. And I think for church planners, why are church planners always called to the elite anyway? Have you noticed that? Oh yeah, I feel called to Palm Beach. Really? Yeah, I feel called to Rancho Santa Fe. Oh, wow. That's shocking, So again, it's just something to think about. So in what areas is there a vacuum? In what areas do you see a real need? But you're always going to have, whenever you have a growing church, you're always going to have churches of the blessed subtraction. You point out to me some of the great moves of God in churches, and I'll show you 3 or 4 churches surrounding them that are churches of the blessed subtraction, or I call them boutique churches. They're churches that are so people specific that they can suck the people away from your church who want this super specific ministry. well, we're a church that only goes to the book of Revelation, and we talk to 27 to 31-year-olds who have one body piercing and 17 tattoos. That's the church for us. And oh yeah, the other church, we're the between 50 and 70 years of age church, and we sing the old hymns with some praise songs, and we teach expositional just through the synoptic gospels. I mean, it's really unbelievable and hilarious. So I'm all for church planting, but is it church planting or church transplanting? I'm all for church starts, but hey, I'm telling you, you are out of God's will and you're not doing God's work if you go and leverage the people that you've met through a church and go down the street and start one, or you split some church or siphon, a bunch of people. I mean, that's weak. If you're that big and bad, go out and do it yourself somewhere else. And people just, it's sad, the lack of loyalty, the lack of commitment, the level of betrayal in churches is mind-boggling. And that's the reason so many pastors are so aloof and don't have very many friends, is because trust is both the friend and the foe of betrayal. The church is a place of betrayal. When you put your heart out, you're going to get it handed to you, and that's part of it. But man, let's don't shoot our wounded, because that's what a lot of people do under the auspices of church planting. So I look forward to hearing your responses on my blog from this, because it's very interesting when you think about it, because I've lived it out. So if you've not lived it out, I really don't want to hear from you. But if you've lived it out, I'll hear from you. So anyway.